If you're in the auditorium class, we're not going to start for another 3 or 4 minutes, but if you'll come in and sit in the center two sections, that is the request of the elders, that you sit in the center two sections so we can kind of be heard just a little bit better. Matt? Gentlemen?
Let's move all the way
Go
over
ahead.
so we don't have to.
All right. If you are in the auditorium class, welcome. We're going to talk about some of the things that we can mirror in the example of Jesus, but learn how, perhaps on a more applicable basis, how to take the lesson that we just talked about and infuse it into our lives. I'm going to take the Bible study this morning and I'm going to chop it into two parts. Just kind of like the lesson was in many respects. I'm going to chop it into a physical and a spiritual side. And so we're going to focus on the physical side first. But I want us to consider all of these things that Jesus did physically and spiritually to heal those who were in need. I'm going to ask a question in particular in just a minute, and I'm not going to necessarily use the word healing. It oftentimes only brings into consideration people who are sick, and there are sometimes people who are simply hurting. They may be hurting due to sickness, but they also may be hurting due to other reasons as well, and I think that we need to be compassionate toward all of these folks, no matter who it is that we are specifically referencing. So let's talk about, for just a moment, let's talk about the physically ill. Okay, those who are hurting in some kind of physical way. And I want to use as an example, I don't think he's in here right now, he is probably in another study, but I want you to consider one of your elders who just lost his mother of 95 years this past week or so. I want you to think about that. Is he hurting? I didn't ask, is he sick? Is he hurting? And you saw him this morning. He put on a very strong, very positive, very joyful sight in his announcements and in his thanksgiving for all of your kind wishes and prayers. But is he hurting? Even if his mother was a member of the body of Christ and looks forward to that eternal home in heaven, is Russ hurting? Absolutely. because for the moment, there is a part of his physical life that is missing. A moment that he's had his entire life up until just a few days ago. So when we look at people who are hurting, we're not, again, just looking at someone who is sick with a cold, someone who is handicapped in some physical way, somebody who is ill in some other fashion. There may be a lot of things that we need to take mention into. So let me ask you this. How do you go about noticing someone who is physically hurting? How do you, or how should we all, go about noticing someone who is physically hurting? You can ask. So quite literally, are you suggesting there may be times when we don't notice anything? But maybe just asking gives us the insight that we were not otherwise going to accomplish ourselves. Does everyone hurt at some point in time? Sure, absolutely. Everybody does. Young and old, male and female, everyone hurts at some point in time. Some of those may be normal parts of their lives. Some of those may be moments in their lives that are fleeting. In other words, they come, they go. But sometimes we may not know unless we ask. Why do we not ask? Yeah, we don't want to pry, maybe. We sometimes figure that if somebody else is hurting, if they want our help, they'll ask for it. Okay, so why don't they ask for it? Sometimes it may be pride. Sometimes it may be pride. How many of you are raised not to be a bother to somebody else? Okay? So if I'm hurting and I come to you for the simplest little request, and that request may be prayer. How many of us have, were ever thinking of the point that if I bother somebody else, I'm taking away from people who need that time and need that attention and maybe need those prayers? Okay? So what conclusion am I drawing if I'm the person hurting and I don't ask you for help? What conclusion have I just drawn? I may conclude that. Okay. I mean, generally speaking in the church, if I'm hurting, okay, so instance, my mother has health issues, my wife has health issues, every single Sunday, the gentlemen who lead prayers here lead prayers for my wife and my mother. Okay? At some point in time, do I need to look at Risa and say, Risa, I need you to take that out of the bulletin. We've prayed for them enough. But do people sometimes feel that way? And brethren, if you can't answer that question, I'm going to let you know, having been the bulletin person for most of the congregations I've worked for over the past 30 plus years, I can tell you that is most definitely an issue in the church. People do not want to be a bother. Open up your Bibles for just a second. Turn to Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6. Everybody look at verse 5. Galatians chapter 6, verse 5. For each one will bear his own load. What is that teaching me? Self-sufficiency? Take care of your own problems? Take full responsibility for your life? How many of us agree with that? By the way, the Bible's teaching it, so you should probably say yes. Okay? Okay? Yeah. Don't want to throw you off on that one, okay? I absolutely agree with that. Most of us were raised to believe this way. Most of us were raised to live this way. Now, I realize that there are other issues that go on in the world, and sometimes people may not have the family that some of us had, and they may not have the blessings that some of us have received, and so they may not have received this kind of teaching, but it's there. Gary? It is. In fact, it's out of context from a verse that's just 3-4 verses away from it. Everybody look at verse 2. Because verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. How many of you believe that one? It's there again. Go ahead, raise your hand. You know, it is. But now, he makes a good point that if we ever just take one verse and try to make that everything, then we've created something that the Bible doesn't teach. The Bible does not teach bear one another's burdens only. Nor does the Bible teach take care of your own problems only. It's interesting in the Bible how many times God creates two areas of direction to fix one problem. So let me give you an illustration, okay? Let's say Jason and I, we're friends. I have done something wrong. I have sinned. I have sinned against Jason. Whose job is it to fix this problem? Whose job is it? Both. The Bible tells me that if my brother's in sin, I need to what? Go to him. But the Bible also says that if I'm in sin, I need to, if I've sinned against my brother, I need to what? Go and fix it. The passage of Scripture that talks about if I'm going to make my offering and I remember that my brother has aught against me, okay, then I lay that gift down and I go resolve that problem first. It's very interesting. Although we sometimes turn that into the Lord's Supper, that's really wasn't talking about the Lord's Supper in particular, but it's a principle that is taught us in 1 Corinthians 11. And that is that prior to partaking of the Lord's Supper, every one of us must what? Examine ourselves to make sure that we are right with God before we partake of this. And so it's interesting when it comes to bearing burdens. The idea that I need to bear my own burdens is very much a biblical principle, but it's not the only, because there are times when I may not be able to do this. You know, when I look at my wife right now, there's no 50-50, you know, right now. You know, there's no, hey, sweetie, I've done my 50% of the household chores for the day. You need to get with the other. No, she can't walk. She can't talk. She can't move that much. She literally has, of all of her appendages at this point in time, she has one arm, at best, has 20% mobility, and no longer the dexterity in her fingers that she used to have. She used to be able to follow on Facebook, and now a lot of times what my daughter will do with her is they'll open up the messages or text messages or whatever that's come to them, and they'll read them together, and then sometimes Mary will send a message back on behalf of Sherry, and she'll say, this is Mary, and I'm sending you this message from Mom, but she wants you to know she loves you, that kind of thing. But Sherry's not able to bear certain physical burdens any longer. She just can't do it. She cannot. It's interesting. It's a very sobering thought. I don't usually mention this kind of thing publicly too much, but it's something I thought about recently, and I've pondered on it a while. But for modern medicine, but for modern medical capabilities, my wife would already be gone. She's 57 years old, but she'd already be gone. And the reason I say that is because she is fed with a feeding tube. And if you don't understand what a feeding tube is, other than in principle, you know, if you know what a beach ball is, and you know that little plastic thing, you pop the thing and you sit there and you blow it up and then you put it back. She literally has one of those coming out of her stomach. She had a surgery and it put a little tube into her stomach, and on the outside there's that little little thing that you flip up, and we connect that to a tube. We pour stuff in it. That's how she eats, because she cannot swallow anymore. If we were to try to feed her something with her mouth right now, she would very possibly, I shouldn't say possibly, I would say very probably choke, and based upon the food or how it went in or whatever, it could kill her. It just could. She has not eaten food in that capacity since May of last year. Maybe April, but May for sure. And so she cannot do for herself what she has always done for herself and others. Feeding the family, taking care of the family, washing clothes, washing dishes, vacuuming the house, things like that. She cannot do that. And so that's where the other part of that comes into play. You know, there is in marriage counseling, there is an idea amongst younger therapists that each person in the marriage should give 50%. Except that just doesn't always work. There are just too many times where one person may have to give 100%, and the other, because the other person can't give. Whenever I've had marriage counseling, or whenever I've had taught marriage therapy classes and things like that, I've always talked about it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. Both of you are giving your best. Both of you are giving your all. It's just like your relationship with God. What percentage should you give to God? 100%. Now, will he do his part? Absolutely. What's great about God is he'll do his part when we can't do ours. And there may be times when we cannot do what we want to do, or even what we're accustomed to doing. So now let's go back to this idea of illness, okay? Because I'm about to get to my halfway point in class. But how do we help people? Give me some ideas how we help them physically. This is not a difficult question. I don't bring it up just to see if we remember the teachings that we've been given for all these years. No, it's a reminder that it's ever present, that when we walk out of this building today, that we're giving thought to it when we're in the restaurant, when we go to the grocery store, when we drop the kids off at school tomorrow, or whatever the case may be. Who is it that we look to help in their hurt, in their pain, in their anguish? Who do we look to help? Give me some. Just throw them out. Sure. Fatherless and widows. Okay, very good point. James actually makes a point about that. Okay, here is how you take care of the widows and orphans in their distress. So there's a specific admonition that we actually focus on those who are without parents and those who are without a spouse. That's a very good point. And specifically, although I don't believe that it excludes men who have lost their wives, back in the first century, a man losing his wife still had property, still had title, still had lots of things to take care of himself. Women often did not. And so if they did not have family to care for them, a lot of times there were about two choices that they had, and neither of them were good. One was begging, and the other, if they were young enough and could, might actually be prostitution. And so they were not good options. And so the idea of taking care, especially in difficult worlds, difficult countries, difficult nations of the world, the idea is that we make sure that we give them the attention that they need. And they, in the first century, needed a lot. Who else do we help who is physically hurting? And again, it doesn't mean physical sickness. But I'm talking about in this world, physically hurting. Okay? But especially to whom? There you go. That's right. Now, this is a good point that Paul makes in the book of Galatians. The idea that we are to do, I believe I'm correct in that, but we are to do good to all people, especially to those who are the household of the faith. So the idea here is not that we simply do good to all people, but it does start off by saying do good to all people. But of all the people you do good to, who do we especially do good to? Now here's what's interesting. I have found that sometimes in the church, various congregations and different congregations are different. But I've known of congregations who have done an amazing job reaching out into the community, reaching out to the people who are hungry, reaching out to the people who have financial issues, reaching out, and they forget to focus on the body. You know, it's interesting. The question is, should we be involved in foreign mission work? Well, sure. Absolutely. That's a part of going into all the world and preaching the gospel. What happens if you're so involved in foreign missionary work that you neglect the local congregation? Both works die. Because if you don't have a congregation locally to do the work, foreign, then what happens? They both cease. So there's a reason why Jesus would even talk about, or the New Testament in particular would talk about, this idea of moving out into the world, and more specifically to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. There's a reason why you start at home and you build strength at home, because everything else won't work if you don't do first things first. Now, what happens to those congregations that focus only on the home and they don't focus on the people that are out? Whether they be out in the community or out in the world, what happens? The church doesn't grow. The local congregation doesn't grow. Where's your evangelism? Where's your outreach? Well, it doesn't. And so you have a problem. The idea is that we do all of these things, that we focus on pulling up my own bootstraps, but I also have to humble myself at some points in time to make sure that others are able to and allowed to, by my pride, allowed to help me when I need it. Back in 2016, I was in a car accident. A kid ran a light and hit me where my daughter had just been sitting before I dropped her off. And if she had been sitting in there, I don't know what shape she would have been in. But he hit the back of the car. He did a T-bone, but he didn't truly T me. So he hit the back and spun me in a 360. But I ended up breaking my right arm. My right arm is my good arm, the one that I write with and things like that. But I remember I was hit on a Wednesday. The local congregation took care of teaching for me that night because I was in the hospital. And later that night, because one of the bones in my arm had exited my arm and then pulled right back in, because of that type of damage, they had to take me to Tampa where I would have surgery. And I didn't get to Tampa that night until 9:30 that night. They didn't do the surgery until the next night around 10:30. So I was just kind of in a bandaged up, broken arm for 24 hours plus before I actually had the surgery. And then I came home. I was brought home on a Friday. So I had the surgery late in the middle of the night, about 10:30 at night, Thursday night. And on Friday, middle of the day, I was brought home by some friends. My daughter was scheduled to go to camp the next day. And my wife was working up in Missouri at the time. So that was all at home. And my daughter did not want to leave, but I told her I would be fine. And I was going to be fine. But I wanted her to go to Bible camp, and so I had to kind of let her know that that was okay. And so she went off to Bible camp, and I was home alone. Broken arm, right arm, fresh out of surgery. And I can't remember if I preached that Sunday or if they told me not to. I can't remember that part. But I remember Linda Bridges. Linda Bridges was a lady in the church who passed away not too very long ago. And She showed up at my house. She did not ask me, is there anything I can do for you? She just assumed that the normal things of life needed to be done, and I didn't have the ability to do it like I normally would. So she showed up, and she brought me some soup, something I didn't have to cut up with my left hand. Brought me some chili, something I didn't have to cut up with my left hand. She brought me some things like that that were very easy for me to eat, and she brought them already in containers that I could microwave because she knew I'm a microwave kind of guy, okay? Me and stovetops, there's not a connection there. And so she brought that to me. But here's what was really interesting. Who's going to do my laundry? Who's going to do those things? I certainly did not bring that up. I would have never brought that up. Partially because I'm supposed to take care of myself, but partially due to pride. I would not want to bother someone and impose on someone something that even if it took me 10 times as long that I could have done. But she just assumed I had dirty laundry. She just assumed that I had that need. And she said, where's your dirty laundry? And I said, oh, Linda, don't worry about that. She goes, I'm not worried about it at all. Where's your dirty laundry? Okay. And Linda was not going to leave until she had the dirty laundry. I knew that about Linda, so guess what? I gave Linda my dirty laundry. I got that laundry back like a day later. And I'm telling you, we must use some really cheap detergent in my house. This was the best smelling laundry that I mean, I just need all of you to know that if somebody were to give me a polygraph test, a lie detector test, and the question was, when's the best, or at what point in your life did you smell the best fresh laundry ever? That would be it. When she brought that back, it just was amazing. And I was like, man, I want you to do it every week from now on, you know. Even when I'm healed up, if you could please do my laundry, I would appreciate it. But she was so kind about that. She did not ask, and brethren, please understand, I'm not saying this is a bad thing to ask. There's just more that's necessary. Don't only say to somebody, if there's anything I can do, let me know, because they're not going to let you know. You all understand that? And yet they've probably got lots of things they need done. You know, when I think about Russ right now, I don't know what all his family's going through. He's healthy, his wife's healthy, his son's healthy. I mean, I don't have doubts about that. But are there things we can do for them? Are there things, you know, it's interesting. We don't do a whole lot with flowers around the house because Sherry and I have figured that our thumbs are anything but green. And so we just about kill anything living that we get a hold of. So we just tell people, don't bring us anything. But, you know, somebody the other day sent Sherry by Amazon a big thing of flowers made out of paper. I pulled it out, you opened it up, you did a little thing or two here or there, and now she has this permanent ornament of flowers in front of her where she can see them and she can be encouraged by it. Well, that's very nice. They're just thinking outside the box. What can I do? Because Sherry has a physical ailment, okay? She has a physical limitation, and it's severe. But she hasn't stopped smiling yet. And so this gives her another opportunity to be happy and to smile. Yes, sir. Right. You know, you bring a good point up because that was the point about Jesus when the woman who was caught in adultery is brought to him. Did he just beat her over the head with that? No. But did he address it? Yes. He did so with kindness. He didn't skip it. He didn't overlook it. He didn't ignore it. He addressed it. But he did so very kindly. Whereas all those other guys, I mean, if she's truly caught in the act of adultery, obviously there's a marriage there that somebody is interfering with. That's the definition of adultery. And so there's a marriage there that somebody is interfering with, somebody is not being faithful to. Jesus knew that. And it had just been made public. But he says, I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to beat you over the head with this. But go and sin no more. Don't just keep doing it. He took that opportunity to tell her in the middle of that circumstance what she had been doing was wrong. But he did so in a way that hopefully she would appreciate and could respect. Thomas? Sure. We live in a day and age where how easy is it to text somebody? How easy is it to send them an email? How easy is it to make a phone call? And you don't even have to make a phone call. You can do a video chat. And it just doesn't take much at all. We can reach out to people without ever even leaving our home. But we need to do it. One of the things that Thomas said, he said there are some of those people who have that gift. Those people who, it's like Linda Bridges. Nobody else showed up at my house and brought me food, and food that I could eat, and food that I could warm up, and food that, nobody else did that. I was the preacher for the congregation. I don't mean that to try to give me some kind of a pat on the back, but what I'm saying is, of all of the publicly visible members of the church, who is seen more than the guy that stands up there every single week in front of you? I had nobody else bring me food. I had nobody else pick up my laundry, but she did. She had that gift. She had that talent. Now, here's the question. Does that mean that we just let the Linda Bridges of the world do their jobs and we go on about what we need to do? No, because we need to do that as well. Remember what Galatians 6 and verse 2 said. We also need to bear one another's burdens. And if you happen to have a gift for that, good for you. But if you're lousy at it, time to get better. Time to get better. Because the charge is given to all of us, whether we have that gift or we don't. All of us are to bear one another's burdens just as much as we're to bear our own burdens. Now, second thing, last part of our study here. How do we go about finding those people who are lost in sin? I won't say hurting or sick. I'm just going to say what it is, lost. How do we go about helping those people? We ask, okay? Are you just going to go up to somebody and say, hey, are you a Christian? Because a lot of people would feel uncomfortable with that question. A lot of people would answer it thinking that they are saved when in fact they're lost. They bought into some man-made teaching instead of Lord-made teaching. And so how do we do that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, very good point. But I'm going to back you up there. You said no, you didn't say anything wrong, but I'm just going to challenge something you said. You made the point, said you're not real good at bringing them up. So how do you get good at that? Well, that's a good point. Something, yes, ma'am. Okay. I'm going to come back to him in just a second, but I'm going to make this point because Reese and I were having this conversation. My old business card, which 2 years later I'd need to get a new one, I guess, but I still have my old one in my wallet, but it has a picture of the old church building where I used to preach. It has address, telephone number, basic information. But then on the back, I have the time of every Bible study and worship service of the church. Then underneath it, I have our web address. I have our YouTube channel. I have our Facebook page, and I had a Facebook page specifically, and I've just changed the name now that I'm not there anymore, but we have a Facebook page that we're very evangelistic with, that we put a lot of things that are out there of all subjects and topics and phrases, but we use the internet a lot in order to get that word out. And that, by the way, is something that's free. So my question originally came back, if you're not comfortable bringing it up to people, how do you get comfortable bringing it up to people? And I will say something that the elders have planned for later in this year, and I can tell you exactly when it's going to happen. It's going to happen the soonest Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday after Labor Day. I can tell you that right now. Okay, right there around September. But this is when we are going to have our Fishers of Men class. And over the course of 2026, while I am here, it's the only one that I know we'll have. It is an intensive program. It requires a lot of study and a lot of work on your part. The class that we're going to take in 2 weeks, Financial Peace, show up. We're going to have somebody bringing in some food or something like that. We're going to have a wonderful time together, and then you're going to go home. But Fishers of Men is a personal evangelism program that teaches you how to bring up that subject with people, how to have those conversations, how to ask the kind of questions that will get other people hopefully interested in wanting to learn the answers, and then it teaches you how to take them to the Bible and show them the answers. It's not your job to just give answers. It's your job to show them God's answers. And so the better you can do that, the better off. So that's going to be coming up right around September, right after Labor Day. I mean, immediately after Labor Day, because we try to have the class done before we get into conflict with the Thanksgiving holidays. And so that's something coming up. You want to learn how to better bring up the subject of religion, bring up the subject of Jesus, talk more freely about the gospel of Christ, hopefully get somebody to actually have a Bible study with you and then carry out an effective Bible study, take that class. I've been teaching it for years, and I learn more every time I teach it. Now, I had a hand up back there. Am I correct? Did I have another hand? And then I've got up here. Yes, sir. That's a very good point. He's talking about our example. And he says, when people see your Christian example, when they see how different you are with the world around them, that stands out. Now, here's what I want to say that kind of goes along with what we've been talking about, the twos. Anytime you think that that's enough, you're wrong. Because are we to have a bright and shining light before men? Yes. Are we to be good examples? Yes. But brethren, does the Bible tell us, and if you're a disciple of Christ, this was directed at you, to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all of creation. Okay? Can you preach by example? Well, in some ways you could in a loose-fitting way, but preach means to proclaim. It means to speak. You have to be auditory. And brethren, how many of you have been baptized? Raise your hand if you have been baptized. Raise it up big and tall. Now, with that being said, here's the point. If you've already been baptized, how are you ever going to exemplify baptism to somebody? Because you've already been baptized. Yeah, you got to teach it. You've got to use your mouth and teach. I didn't say that everybody in here is going to become a pulpit preacher. I didn't say that. But the idea is that at some point in time, all of us have to open our mouths and share the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Will it always be the most effective way that the world's ever? No, I didn't say that. But all of us need to be able to teach, tell, proclaim, preach what we understand to be truth, because we're the ones that responded to it. If you put on Christ in baptism, you ought to know why. Otherwise, you just got wet. But if you were baptized into Christ, you should understand why that was so important and why other people need to do it. And so that responsibility comes to you. The good example is necessary, because I could take this in the reverse and say, hey, you all need to preach the gospel, but don't be such a good example. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to use your mouth and you've got to use your life. You've got to use your example and your influence as much as you have to use knowledge of the Scriptures, which is why we're doing what we're doing this year in the lessons that we're doing. We're laying a foundation, first and foremost, on Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus? I'm about to preach a lesson about him coming up very shortly. Jesus, the Prince of? Not at all. Not at all. Now, Reese is going to take it and put it in these bulletins and just drive me crazy and let all of you know ahead of time. I'm going to start giving her coded lesson titles so that y'all don't know what my real title is. I've never had to do this in 30 years. Everybody knows what my sermons are ahead of time. But that's the thing. We're going to talk about it. But I promise you, I'm not going to talk about the Prince of Peace. You've heard about him. I'm going to talk about the Prince of something else. And that's a part of Jesus we need to understand, that we need to know. So let me say this. Let me go back over here to your point. Good point. Good point. Goomer, last comment. Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, I'll tell you real quickly, that fellow we picked up on the side of the road on the way to school when I was much younger that made my mom uncomfortable, the guy was so nice and so polite, and like I said, he was military. He was just on a short leave, but we dropped him off, and he just couldn't say enough kind words to us. And Mom and I drove quietly down the highway for several miles until she finally said that was the right thing to do. So now, that makes a young man feel good when his mama says that. But, you know, it is true. It's not just a task that we do. It's a part of who we are. And the idea that Jesus was a healer was because night and day, all day long, everywhere he was compassionate. And so the reason that we need to reach out to help those who are in need, both physically and spiritually, and there's so much more we could talk about, we just don't have time. But if we are compassionate toward all that we see, not just at the times when we want to see it, when we've got plenty of time and our schedule's not going to be encroached by anything, but when we're always looking for people who are in need, people who are in need of help, and we can assist them. That's just a part of who we are as Christians. And when we get into some of the later discussions in the year about living a Christian life, that's going to be important for us to understand. And it is amazing how many things that I have to talk about over the course of this year, and I don't have time for all of it. And so I'm going to have to, in some ways, dredge it out, or we're going to have to start having 3 and 4 bells that I'm going to not pay attention to instead of just the 2 that I don't seem to pay attention to. But keep that in mind, guys. Be compassionate. If you're compassionate, you'll notice the people who are hurting and who need help, and then you can serve them as Jesus did and as he would have you do. Y'all have a great day.